I'm going to say something, John, that I think might trigger a lot of SEC fans, which is this. You watched the SEC last week. I'm sure you know the stat. This is the first time that 7 ranked SEC teams have lost to unranked teams in the SEC on the road. First time that's ever happened in the history of the conference. They're beating themselves up. They now only have 3 teams likely in line for the playoff because Alabama fell to 9-3, unless they decide to keep Alabama ahead of SMU, but I'm not sure they will. Is the SEC cannibalizing itself, or is it just not as good with the elite teams as it's been in recent years?
All of the above. I think the SEC right now, and I thought this going into the season, and I probably should say that in terms of college football in general, there's not a super team out there. There's no 2019 LSU team, no 2020 Alabama team, no 21-22 back-to-back national championship Georgia teams. This Ohio State team is not as good to me as Ohio State team that lost to Georgia in the semifinals and very easily could have won that game in 2022, one of the better playoff games we've ever seen. But I think the same thing about the SEC, and I thought it going in. I was looking at the potential for a lot of 10-2 teams. And some of those 10-2 teams have become 9-3, and that shouldn't shock us. So what we have, I think the SEC is really strong in terms when I compare it to other conferences. I think it's so much tougher to win a game at Auburn than it is to win a game at Wisconsin or to win a game at Minnesota. I think if Indiana were in the SEC, it would be, say Indiana played, I don't know, let's give it Alabama's schedule. I think Indiana at very best would be 8-4, maybe 7-5 probably. So just part of this is on the eye test. We talk a lot about the eye test. And when I look at these teams, a lot of SEC teams don't pass the eye test. But the competition factors into that. Some teams can look really good against an inferior opponent. You look at them and say, and I kind of thought that about Indiana. I really liked Indiana. I'd seen them quite a few times this year early on. And I thought, man, I don't know how Indiana got this good a team, but it's really talented. But then I watched it some against Michigan, mediocre team. It didn't look nearly as good. Then I watched it against Ohio State. And I know it had special team blunders that factored into the final score, but it didn't look like the same Indiana team I saw that looked so good on the eye test. It didn't look like it belonged in that kind of game. And part of that was the special teams mishaps, poor punt coverage, botched snap, but just at the line of scrimmage. So I guess what I'm saying is I still think the SEC is the strongest conference. And I really think the idea of a one-loss Indiana team that hasn't got a single good win. When I look at some 9-3 SEC teams, I think if you do in a fair world, you evaluate based on strength of schedule. And the committee, I don't think, is doing that.
No,
so it's looking too much at the record, and it says it values strength of schedule, but its actions don't back that up. Because when you take a team, let's just say Georgia's upset by Georgia Tech this week. That's not out of the realm. And say it loses in the championship game. So it could end up with 4 losses. South Carolina, if South Carolina and Indiana were playing in a neutral field this Saturday, I would pick South Carolina.
Oh, I agree. I think Vegas would favor South Carolina too. And
that's my point. I agree with you on both counts. It's not, these aren't great teams, but they're still better than a lot of these teams that they're being compared to when we talk about the playoff selection. When I'm watching the A&M Auburn game. A&M looks pretty ordinary at times. And Auburn Auburn has talent. The idea that A&M could win this conference is pretty stunning. It beats Texas, plays in the championship game, beats Georgia. It's the SEC champion. Does that look like an SEC championship team? No. So I've got real mixed feelings, but I have a hard time looking at the playoff field and thinking that you're going to take a one-loss Indiana team with no good wins, no top 25 wins.
Not just top 25. They don't have a win over a team with a winning record. I mean, that's insane. I think maybe Michigan just got up to 6-5 last week.
Well, see, the teams that they need to have a winning record, they're going to be like 7-5. I don't think they're going to have a win over a team with fewer than 5 losses when it's all said and done. Now, how can you make a case for that being a playoff team? You say, well, look at its record. Kurt Cignetti doesn't have any problem making the case for them. But as an observer, I do. And it would be just the SEC. I look at some of these other teams in the ACC. How many teams do you think the ACC will get 2 teams in now?
I think it's possible because I think SMU could leapfrog Alabama, and SMU and Miami are probably going to play for the ACC title, and so they might put both of them in.
I'm not sure how good Miami is.
Oh, I'm not either. I think they have a great quarterback.
They do.
And as you know, covering Gene Chizik, sometimes you can have a really unintelligent coach who lands an amazing quarterback and goes and wins a national championship because of it.
Well, Cam Ward has saved Miami a number of times, and give Miami credit for getting this quarterback in the transfer portal. So, but I look at Miami's defense, and I really question how it would hold up in the SEC. I think Jalen Milroe on his best day reminds me of Vince Young, but Alabama's whole offense is geared to Jalen Milroe. He's their running game. I look at Alabama and see, on one hand, I'm saying the SEC is the best conference, and I really believe that, but it's not loaded with great teams. So Alabama and Auburn playing this weekend, it's in Tuscaloosa, so you think surely Alabama will win. I don't know that. I'm not so sure. Auburn's got some talent. It hasn't played like it a lot of times, and until the A&M game, it had found ways to lose. It almost found a way to lose a game in which he had a 21-0 lead. So I'm kind of mystified by all of this, but I just can't buy a playoff that has only 3 SEC teams. I just don't think that's right.
Oh, I get it. And the point you make with Indiana, and I've told people who think it's SEC or Big Ten bias, I'm like, it's not Big Ten bias. It's not SEC bias. I mean, even relative to the Big Ten, Indiana has played all of the bad teams in the Big Ten. Like, they avoided Illinois, they avoided Penn State, and they avoided Oregon. I mean, just play one of those teams, and we could be having a different conversation.
I'm just thinking, Caleb, that the 1-3 or better SEC team that I would pick Indiana against would be Missouri. Yes. Missouri's lost 3 games. However, think how close Missouri. It's 1 loss away from being in the playoff conversation.
And then we have to hear Eli Drinkwitz talk trash about, I mean, did you see him on Saturday at Mississippi State? I lit into him yesterday for that,
Well, and here's another thing. Think about this. Shane Beamer, if South Carolina beats Clemson, I can write Shane Beamer's speech for him right now. I can see him turning that head and giving that smirk, saying, do you really think we don't belong in the playoff now? Come on, guys. You know we do. Do you want to play our team? We've won 6 straight now. He'll be talking about this from now until next August.
You're right.
If he beats Clemson. And it'll be fun for a while, and then we'll get annoyed by it. But it'll be fun for a while. But this is made for him. That's why I'm pulling for South Carolina against Clemson, just so I can see how Shane Beamer responds. I think it could be really good entertainment because he can play that role so well. You know, he's gonna give it this. Like, do you really think we don't belong in the playoff? Come on, you guys have seen a lot of football. Do you really think we aren't a playoff team? Ask Dabo Swinney if we're a playoff team. Go ahead, go ask him.
That's a great point. That is exactly how that could play out. The interesting thing about that, so I want to push back just a little bit. I will say Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin actually is one of those Big Ten stadiums that is like an SEC stadium. So it's like it is like going on the road there.
Yeah, it is. I've been to a game there, and I had no idea because this is 50 years ago. I was in the Army. I went to a game at Camp Randall, and I wasn't ready for that. Boy, those people were really into it. The stadium was packed. It was kind of like an SEC atmosphere. I don't know if their fans lived and died with the outcome that the way SEC fans do, but I do know those fans were rowdy and into the game and loud.
Yeah, no, I agree. The other point is, so I think the SEC, I think we're seeing clearly goes deeper than any conference. And you're right. It's not necessarily like, you can't take everything with circular logic, like these teams better than this team. It's every week you're playing a decent team that if you're not fully focused is capable of upsetting you. You do have to deal with that much more in the SEC. I will say at the same time, I think the top of the Big Ten might be better than the SEC this year in the sense of, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like Oregon and Ohio State are legit powers. I don't know what you think about that. Where I think there's a chance that Oregon and Ohio State could be one-loss or undefeated teams if they played in the SEC this year too, as they are in the Big Ten.
I wouldn't be shocked if they played for the national championship. I don't know how the seeding would be and all that stuff. And they had a great game between each other. However, I still wonder about those teams because when I look at the SEC, the two teams I think are the best teams, the most talented teams, the teams that on their best day soar the highest and pass the eye test very easily are Texas and Ole Miss. I think those are the two most talented rosters. But I watched Texas beat Vanderbilt by 3 points. I watched Georgia go into Austin and handle Texas. Texas made a lot of turnovers. I watched Ole Miss. How does Ole Miss lose to Kentucky? How does it outplayed LSU for the vast majority of the game and still managed to lose that game? And I know Florida's better, and I know the Swamp can be a hostile venue, but still, Ole Miss had no business losing to Florida in that situation when it has everything to play for. But I kind of look at Ole Miss, Texas, and I wonder about Ohio State in the same light because I watched Ohio State against Nebraska. It didn't pass the eye test. It didn't look like a potential national champion in that game. Nebraska, as you know, is very limited. And it really struggled through that game. So I wonder about these teams that I think look the best. And I don't think Georgia looks that great. But Georgia beat Tennessee, solid win. And it goes into Austin, it beats Texas. And we know what Kirby Smart can do in big games. So maybe I'm underrating Georgia and maybe I overrated those other teams. And I wonder, so that's how I'm viewing. I guess I would like to see it. Maybe that's the test. I want to see Oregon play Georgia in a big game on a neutral field. I want to see Ohio State play Georgia on a neutral field. Then I'll feel more comfortable saying those are the two best teams in the country. I do like Oregon, and I do like Dan Lanning as a coach. He was on that Kirby Smart staff, and I think he's a really good motivator. I think Kirby Smart's the best motivator in college football. I think Dan Lanning's really adept at that too. So what do you think? Right now, just what do you think? If you're picking your Final Four, If you could set up, we're just going to have a 4-team playoff right now. Tell me the 4 teams you think ought to be in the playoff.
I would go Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia. Man, I'm really struggling after that. I mean, because like talent-wise, you're right. You'd want to say Ole Miss or Texas. Texas needs more of a resume to me, though. If they got to beat at least Texas A&M to me before I say Texas is in there. And
that's fair. I mean, Texas has no great wins, and
none.
so, but who? See, that kind of gets back to the point of the elite teams. Who do you put in there for the 4th team? You can't come up with one. You can separate those 3 teams, but then when you look for a 4th team, you see Alabama on its best day, and you say, "Yeah, Alabama belongs there." Watch it against Oklahoma and say, "Get out of here! I don't ever want to look at you guys." What are you talking about? I apologize for thinking you were so good. Miami, boy, Miami looked when it played Florida early in the year. I mean, we're all influenced by what we just saw. So I'm thinking, man, I knew they were pretty good offensively, but they were dominant on both sides of the ball in that game. And I'm thinking, that looks like a playoff team. And here's another, I will disparage myself here. I watched that Southern Cal LSU game, and I'm looking at it from the lens of these teams are good. Okay.
Right.
So I'm thinking, wow, those teams could meet again in the playoff. If you catch Southern Cal when it's at its best almost any year, you say, huh, man, I wouldn't want to face that team in the playoffs, but you probably won't face that team in the playoff.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of games that really make me wonder and question. You got to get a greater body of work. That's a very valid opinion on Texas. You'd like to see Texas win a really tough game. You'd like to see it win at Georgia, win it at Alabama. Or look what Ole Miss did to Georgia.
Right. I mean, and I would like to. I gave them a break I'm fine with just Texas A&M. Like if they just beat Texas A&M, I'm like, okay, you got a quality win on your resume at that point. I can let you in, but I can't say when Vanderbilt's your best win right now, and Arkansas when their best win is Tennessee's worst loss. And I'm not so sure Tennessee's played that tough of a schedule this year. I don't think that Texas right now has the resume.
Well, let me ask you this. What team of the ranked teams, what team are you most curious about or most uncertain of in the sense that you're really not sure how good a team is? Is there a team? A team, I guess, that comes to mind with me is SMU.
Yeah.
I don't know how good SMU is. I think if playing Miami, I'd probably pick SMU because I think I know how good Miami is. And,
right.
But maybe SMU has an upside. I'm not sure about SMU's upside, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, and Rhett Lashley, SMU's coach, was Miami's offensive coordinator in 2020 and 2021. So interesting twist there.